Hi, in this video we're going to add a wallpapers share onto our NAS, make sure that the permissions are correct, and then copy the files from a folder on the desktop that I've got on the host machine, which contains wallpapers, so that we can use those in group policies to give wallpapers out to all our clients, which will run on server A. However, the folder is actually going to be on the NAS. So opening up our VirtualBox and looking at our NAS computer here, we created the RAID in the previous video, and looking at our PC we can see our RAID hard drive system here, and I've created a wallpapers folder, and we need to look at the permissions for sharing and file level security. So on the sharing, I go to advanced sharing, and I would then look at the permissions, and normally you'd have everyone, and you remove everyone and then add in the administrator and give them full control, and the authenticated users and give them read only. So while all of our authenticated users in our domain can access and read the wallpapers, they will not be able to change them. That's a recipe for disaster. So at the moment, only the administrators will have read-write access, whereas authenticated users will have read-only access. Okay, so that's on the share level. So we also need to look at that it's on our file level security. So on our file level security, initially what you would do is go to the advanced, disable the inheritance and turn off all the inheritance. That would leave you with just one account, the administrator account. You then edit the administrator account and tick the top box here so they've got full control, and then add in all authenticated users, leaving them with only the read and execute, list and read, but it does not include write or modify. Okay, so it's read only. So it's those three tick boxes that would be ticked, and that's what's done by default. Okay, so that sets up the shares and the permissions on our wallpaper folder. If we have a look at it, it's empty. So what we need to do is to get the files from the folder that's on our desktop. If I do a Shift Control A, do a right mouse click and go copy, and try and paste them in here, it will fail because there's, our paste is grayed out. So why does this not work? Well, the reason is that we have not yet installed the VirtualBox guest editions. So we need to go to our device, down to insert the guest editions, and it should in theory auto run, but if you can't wait for it, just go to the file manager, PC, go to the guest editions, double click it, and it could run. Or if that doesn't run, what we could do is just open in a new window, and the file that we're after is the 64-bit edition, which is this one here. So you just double click on that. Again, the same deal. So next, install. And we always trust from the Oracle Corporation and install the driver. Okay, so it's now asking us to reboot, which is quite fine. While we're doing that, we can actually remove from the optical drive any of the disks. This particular machine is taking a little while to shut down. just pause while this thing shuts down. Okay, now it's restarting. Okay, click in here, send a Control-Alt-Delete, other user, GWMP administrator, usual password. Okay, we're back in again. I'll kill the server manager. What we want to do is just make sure that our guest editions are installed. We can check that by looking at drive C, and in the program files we can see Oracle VirtualBox guest editions. Okay, so we know it's installed, and we can tell also that the desktop size is a bit smaller too, so we could change the desktop settings if we go to advanced and change the size back up to something a little bit more reasonable and keep the changes. Okay, so now we've got it back at a decent size. What we still want to do is get these wallpapers from the desktop of our host machine into our RAID hard drive system of wallpapers. Let's see if we can do that now. So back over to our host desktop. Let's go copy all of that back into here, and no, we can't paste. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just try drag and the actual folder. Okay, so now we've got the entire folder onto the desktop with all the files, and Control A, cut those and stick them into our RAID folder, paste. Okay, so now we've got all these files in our wallpapers folder on our RAID box. I can get rid of the one that's on the desktop, and that makes these wallpapers available for our group policy. Okay, so if we're doing a group policy here, I wouldn't be doing it on the NAS box because this is a member server, but it's not a domain controller. So I'd actually be running this from server A, which is the domain controller. So in that case, looking at the administrative tools, if we look at the group policy management, so there it is. Expand out our forest, expand out our domain. There's our Get Well Medical domain. We have a default domain policy, and when we put all of our organisational units in here, we'll have all those organisational units in here where they can create policies within those organisational units as well. I'm just going to do some very minor default ones at the moment. So looking at that, we can see it's applied against all authenticated users. So we can edit that default domain policy, and what we're looking at is in the user administrative templates and on the desktop, here we could enable the active desktop and then on the desktop wallpaper we could put in a wallpaper for all users. So if you had a corporate logo desktop, this is where you'd put it. If you were creating a wallpaper for different groups, then what I would do is I would actually I'll exit out of this. We're going to come back to this one in a minute. So what I would do is I'd create within the organisational units or at this level and assign it against a group. So I'd remove authenticated users and put the doctors group in, and then create a group policy for the doctor. So I'd have a new doctors only, for example. And I would change the authenticated users here, remove it, and add in the doctors group, assuming that I already had one. And then that would only apply to the doctors. Actually, I just changed it on the group, on the default domain policy. It should have been the doctors. So on the doctors only, you would put the doctors group in there rather than the authenticated users, and then that group policy would apply only to the doctors. So I don't actually need that at the moment, so let's delete that. So edit it. What we're going to put in here is the proxy settings. So we'll have proxy settings for the entire domain so that we can get out to the internet. It stops us from every time we create a new user having to put proxy settings and home pages and all that sort of stuff in. So we can do that all from the default domain policy here. Okay, so what we're going to do is under the user configuration, we'll expand out the preferences down to the control panel settings, and then down to internet settings. And in these internet settings here, if you do a right mouse click in here and go new, and you can do it for particular versions of Internet Explorer. So the later versions like Windows 10, 8, all those sorts of ones, they'll use Internet Explorer 10 and up. So this is also Windows Internet Explorer version 11, 12, whatever. The thing that it doesn't handle is the Edge browser that's in Windows 10. So you need to actually change your Active Directory to add in the capability for group policy control of the Edge browser. That's outside the scope of this at the moment. We're just doing Internet Explorer. So I'm just going to do Internet Explorer 10. And within here, I'm just going to set the home page, www.google.com.au. And you'll notice that this is red. Red means that it doesn't get applied, whereas green does. So in order to change this from red to green, we either hit the F5 or the F6 key. One of them does that particular field, the other one does the entire page. So if I go, I hit the F5 key there, and it's gone green, which is what we want. And over onto content, connections, LAN settings. Here we want to tick the box for proxy, put in proxy.det.nsw.edu.au, make sure it's port number 80, tick the box, hit the F5 key, so it did everything on the page. We're going to go to advanced and put the exclusion in for 192. Asterisk, and it'll come back and say, are you really sure? Press OK, sort of thing. Okay, so let's just check that. We've got the settings in. We've got that. Yep, it's all done. And it's all green, which is what we want. Okay, so there's our preferences set for the Internet Explorer version 10 and above, applied via group policy. Okay, so that's all we need from the default domain policy. If we were going to put wallpapers for individual groups, then we'd create a different group policy just for those groups and apply the wallpaper. We could then change the home page, and if you wanted to create a new preference as well. So file exit. So what I'm going to do is create a wallpaper group policy. So let's go create a new group policy, and I'll create a doctors only. Okay, that's because I already had okay, so it looks like I've already got the doctors only one there. Okay, delete that. Okay, so back to the domain level, create that doctors only. And I'm going to remove the administrative users. Now to do that, I'm going to need to do the Active Directory users and computers. So I'm just going to move this slightly out of the road. Users and computers. And I've got doc1, doc2. Let's create a doctors group. New group. Doctors. So security group, and I can add to a group called doctors. Finds the doctors group. Yep. And if I open up the doctors group and look at the members, I can see I've got the users doc1 and doc2 in that group. So normally you would be putting this in an organizational unit called doctors. I've just got it in the default users group at the moment, but it's indicative of I've got users in a group, and on my group policy, that's the default domain policy. Let's get out of that. This is my doctors only. I'll remove the authenticated users, and this is doctors only, yep. And I'll add in the doctors group. So there's the doctors group. So now this particular group policy will only apply to those doctors. So what I'm going to do is edit that group policy, and I'm going to go to administrative templates and to the desktop, and I'm going to enable the active desktop and go OK. And on the desktop wallpaper, I'm going to go double backslash NAS backslash wallpapers, and let's go select a wallpaper. So let's go to the NAS and back onto our RAID drive in our wallpapers folder, and I'll copy that. It's a JPEG file. on the view of that, I probably could go options and view, and I think here we can show the extensions as well. Show hidden. Currently we've got hide extensions, so we're going to apply, untick that box. Now we can see the actual extension as well, so I'm going to select all of that, control copy. I'm going to see if I can copy and paste from this virtual machine back into our server A, wallpapers / control V. And there's my technical imperfection.jpg. So I've cut the text from the file name in the NAS box over to our server A, and that's only because we've got the bi-directional cut and paste set up in both machines. So we can actually cut and paste between virtual machines and also back onto the desktop. What I want to need to do is I need to check to make sure that this file name, control copy, is actually accessible from everywhere. So I'm just going to go run and then control V and paste the //nas/ wallpapers and then the file name and see if I can access it from server A, and I can. Okay, so that's the actual picture that's in the wallpaper share on the NAS box. Okay, so I've correctly addressed the file and I can apply and go OK on that. So we've now got a desktop wallpaper that applies to doctors of the two users that we've got, which is Doc1 and Doc2 in that group. And so we've got to the doctors group. Okay, so we've created a group policy that refers to a file that's on a share on our NAS box. Even though our group policy is on our server A, it refers to a file that's in a share on our NAS box, and we can definitely contact that. So the other thing that we probably should do is if we run this as an administrator, after you've made a change to your group policy, you normally need to do a GP group policy update /force, and that will force out the group policy from the server to all stations. Now, this workstation is currently logged in as Dr. 1, I'm pretty sure. So if we just went, how do you see that actually? I think you just open up a command prompt. No, we're logged in as administrator at the moment. Okay, so what we're going to do is log in as Doc1, not on our NAS box, but on our workstation. Our workstation probably is logged in as Doc1, and the profile is cached locally. So, the next time we log in, it's probably going to use the cached. So it's going to require 2 logins before the desktop actually arrives in most cases. So we can see here that our GP update force has put out the computer policy and the user policy, and it's completed that successfully. So now we'll test to see whether we can get that wallpaper on our Windows 10 machine. Windows 10, that's it. And I'm going to log this user out, sign out, and log back in again. So let's go. Now you'll notice that the desktop hasn't changed. First time it's using the locally cached profile, next time we'll go back to the server. So I'm going to sign out again and log back in again. Okay, what I'm not seeing is a new desktop, so let's do a GP update force from a command prompt here. So what we're going to do is CMD, let's run that as the administrator. So let's just go GWMP /administrator. Whoops. Administrator, I think I've spelt it correctly, we'll see. And we'll do a GP update /force. And normally you wouldn't have to do this. It would just log in and get the new wallpaper. So what we're going to do is also just check to make sure that we can access that particular share. So if I just go /NAS, I can see the shares on the NAS, and I can see wallpapers, and I can actually see the wallpapers. So I've only got read access. I can't actually, because I'm a doctor, so I'm a authenticated user. I'm not an administrator, so I can't, for example, create a new folder, permissions denied, because I'm only a authenticated user. I'm not an administrator, so I can't make any changes, but I can access it, so that's the important thing. So we've done a GP update force. I'm going to sign out, log back in again. And we get our desktop. Okay, so that's good. Now we haven't logged into this machine with Dr. 2 yet, so we will sign out and log in as Dr. 2, which is a new user. Doc 2, and you can see I'm still signing into GWMP. So new profile, it does the usual setup and should give us our new desktop wallpaper. There we go. Okay, so new users and existing users might need to log out a few times in order to get their desktop paper up, but any new user will get it straight away. So our group policy is working. And the wallpapers on our NAS are working, and we've got those from our desktop by installing our guest editions, of which we've actually removed it now, so it's not, that disk is not actually in there. That ends this particular video.